Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Town Hall number 17. Today we have some special guests speaking to us about 3 Squares Vermont and the food that is so very important for all of us. Today we have Keely Agan, a child nutrition specialist from Hunger Free Vermont, and Kayla Arena-Giron, a food security specialist from Hunger Free Vermont. Ladies, we are so excited that you are here, and just appreciate the energy and the excitement that you bring to us and the knowledge that you're going to be sharing with us today. I'm going to ask those of you joining us, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We'll address them there. And you may also use the raise hand feature, and we will call on you when there's a break in the presentation. So Keely and Kayla, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophia. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and then Keely's going to kick us off. Just give me 1 second.
This is going to be so fun. Awesome. All right. So welcome, everyone. Like Sophie said, we are going to be talking about connecting 3 Squares Vermont to school meals. And my name is Keely Agan. I'm a child nutrition specialist at Hunger Free Vermont. And basically what that means is I work with schools and I work with early care providers, and we talk about food access and food programs in schools and early care settings. And my colleague Kayla is going to talk a little bit more about what she does specifically, but basically as a food security specialist, she works a lot with food programs like 3 Squares Vermont and WIC. All right, let me see if I can control the screen. So our agenda for today, we're going to be touching on a few topics. One's going to be hunger in Vermont, a little bit of a snapshot of what it looks like right now and also kind of pre-COVID. We're going to be talking about child nutrition and food access. Then we're going to dive into more 3 Squares Vermont and school meals. And then we're going to talk about taking action. So we don't want to just talk at you all and explain what's going on in the hunger and food access world. We want to talk about what you specifically in your field can do to take action to decrease food security in your community and your school. And then there will be time for Q&A and discussion afterwards as we kind of debrief on the material. But like they said, you can absolutely put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to take some pauses throughout the presentation to address kind of current questions, but know that we can absolutely talk about it afterward as well. And now we have some adorable pictures up on the screen, adorable pictures of food. These pictures were sent to us by the Burlington School District about what they're doing for bulk breakfast serving right now, which is incredible to think that the school district is serving these meal kits to all of the kids in their schools right now. They're doing some incredible work. And I'm sure you all have been seeing the incredible work that your food service programs have been doing, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Kayla and I actually both have experience working in school districts. I was the Farms to School coordinator at the Milton Town School District before I became a child nutrition specialist at Hunger Free, and Kayla has experience teaching in school districts as well. So we know what the landscape of the school looks like. We've worked directly with school nurses, and we know how much of an advocate for health you guys are already.
So I wanted to include this slide. I was telling folks before we jumped into the presentation that this is also so near and dear to my heart. My mom was a para in a middle school nurse's office in New York for over a decade. And I'd always go visit her, and I'd see all of the kids that would come through the office at any given time during the day. And I know that you all, school nurses, make such a difference in your community. Nurses you all play a really unique key role in your school community that many other school leaders don't play. You have access to all of the students you have relationships to all of the students, and you have access to their families. You play a critical role in uplifting health and wellness and well-being. And you're the folks that people go to, right? That students go to if they have a headache or they have a stomach ache for maybe not eating. They're going to go to the school nurse. And you might be the place where they go to that there's a secret snack stash somewhere where they can get a granola bar or a box of goldfish if they're feeling hungry and need some nutrition. So nurses, you are incredible. I'm sure the pandemic has just made your role so much harder than it already is. But we're so happy to be here today because really, I think school nurses are often left out of the conversation of food access, but I think it should be the opposite because of the role that you play, because you can see every student, because you might be serving students who are coming from food insecure families. You should be a critical part of that conversation for your school. So we're here to enlighten all of you about some of the programs in the state and also just school meal programs. And then hopefully we can equip you with some new knowledge that you can take back to your schools. I want to first say thank you to anyone who was able to participate in the pre-training survey. It was extremely informative for us to look at beforehand. I wanted to pull out two key data points from the results. So 42% of survey respondents reported having little to no current knowledge of 3 Squares Vermont. 36.8% of respondents reported to being pretty familiar with school meal programs. So pretty similar in terms of statistics. And it also shows that there's a lot of room for growth, and that is totally okay. That is why we are here. And that's why we're here after this training to support you and your school in any way that we can. But I thought it would be important to ground us in some of this, a temperature check of where we're at. So just to start us, I thought it would be helpful to get on the same page about what child hunger looks like in the state of Vermont. So typically 1 in 7 Vermont children are food insecure. And we know that the implications of food insecurity can really change a child's life. So this can look like nutrient deficiencies, developmental delays, poor health and higher rates of obesity, lower grades, higher absenteeism and tardiness, and also things like increased anxiety, aggression, and depressive disorders. So, of course, we are in the middle of a pandemic. It's been a year now, and COVID-19 has had a really serious impact on food insecurity. I'm not sure if any of you have seen the UVM study that has been conducted. I believe it was a 3-part study. And we have a bunch of resources, by the way, that we're going to be sending out afterwards. And I'm going to link that study so that you can take a look if you're interested. But this study looks specifically at Vermonters. And within this study of looking at the impact of food security in Vermont, it was found that food insecurity was more common among households with children, 30.3% compared to 20.7% of households who don't have children. And of course, we highlighted that because of the audience that you are and the population that you work with. But some of the other key factors to this, food insecurity was also more common among larger households, people of color, and that statistic was 49% compared to 25.2% white. Female respondents, 27.6% compared to 17.7% male, and also low-income households. I also want to note that this is really no different than food insecurity outside of a pandemic. These are traditionally the marginalized groups who will face food insecurity at a higher rate, but it's all been so exacerbated by the pandemic. I also want to highlight the little quote at the bottom that someone included during the UVM study, and they said that these school meal pickups and deliveries have been such a tremendous blessing. The crew that puts it together are heroes, each and every one of them. So just keep this context in the back of your mind as we continue on.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayla. So we're first going to dive into more of the school meal programs, the National School Lunch Program, the National School Breakfast Program. And these are programs that you might be familiar with, as that's what a lot of children are accessing during the school day, even now in a pandemic. So we really want to highlight that school meals are safe, they're nutritious, and they're convenient. So the universal meal model that's happening right now, which is due to waivers extended by the USDA because of the pandemic, make it so that right now, every child is able to access free school meals. There's no income variable. That means that some children can receive free meals and some can't. Every child right now is able to access free school meals, free breakfast and lunch. And they're able to access them by parents picking them up from open meal sites. That's why they're safe and they're convenient, because they're already put together. And we talk about nutritious. Now, my colleague, who is our advocacy manager, has been advocating for our universal school meals bill that we'll get into a little bit later on. But a conversation that keeps coming up is this whole concept of school meals aren't meeting my level of what nutritious means. I don't think that all school meals are super healthy, is what people are saying. And we're kind of having to combat this conversation because, first and foremost, schools that are serving reimbursable hot lunches actually have to follow certain federal nutrition guidelines. There has to be a certain number of whole grains, a certain number of protein, fruits and vegetables, and milk served with each meal. So even if you're seeing a hot dog hot lunch and you're like, that doesn't seem really healthy, that specific hot dog actually has to meet certain meal components. And it's also having to be served with a certain number of fruits, vegetables, and a milk. But further than that, I want to talk about this whole concept of subjective healthy, right? So we want the best for our students. We want them eating nutrient-dense meals. But if we start to get into this argument of, is this meal the healthiest? First of all, healthy is subjective. We all have our different idea of health. But more importantly, we start stigmatizing the students that are just trying to access food, period. As my colleague Kayla highlighted in the previous slides, there are a lot of children that are not able to access meals, period, a lot of the time. So these school meals that meet these certain federal nutrition guidelines can be some of the only meals that your students are accessing during the day, period. My old boss, Steve Marinelli, who's the food service manager in Milton, would often talk about how at the end of the year, this is true. I mean, I was in the same office as him. We would have students coming in crying because they were losing access to the only meals that they were being served during the school year. And that is why these school meals are so important, because we know that children unable to access proper nutrition are unable to develop. They're not able to learn at the same pace as their peers who are not facing hunger. So due to these waivers that are extending free meals through September 30th, that was just extended on Tuesday, yay. All students are currently accessing meals for free, but during regular times, meal prices are actually determined by income level. Oh, go forward. So like I said, we're going to talk about the Universal School Meals campaign that Hunger Free Vermont has been working on. So Universal school meals would require that all public schools in Vermont make available school breakfast and lunch at no charge to the individual student or family. So it wouldn't be that students would have to fill out a free school meal and free meal application in order to be able to access these meals, and then some students would have to pay for them. Universal school meals improve student performance. We know this in math and English language arts by up to 10 weeks of learning. And universal school meals would be able to reach the 42% of Vermont children who actually are food insecure, but because of the cost of living in Vermont being so high compared to the federal numbers that folks have to reach in order to get free meals, they're not eligible to receive the free or reduced price school meals. So we have this gap in Vermont because of how high cost of living is, where students are still food insecure, but the family's income doesn't meet the eligibility for free school meals. And obviously there are so many more pros to universal school meals. And Hunger Free Vermont created this absolutely adorable YouTube video that's a little bit too long for our presentation today, but it really breaks down in a fun way why universal school meals are so important and why we should advocate for universal school meals to continue even after the pandemic and after the waivers have expired. So we'll talk about those action steps that we're going to want you all to do later on. But one of the action steps is going to be support letters for our Universal School Meals campaign. And we have individual support letters that you can sign on to, as well as organizational support letters. And also we are going to have our little bill handout. This is our like 2-pager that we just hand out to people when we want them to understand the purpose, the importance, and the journey of our Universal School Meals campaign. Oh, and the video wants to play. So this is what it's going to look like when you go to our website. You click on the links that will be included on the website. For you to sign an individual supporter card, organizational sign-ons are amazing, and this is a way for you to be an advocate and advocate for your organization to sign on. And this is our little 2-pager. But what about when children aren't in school? So we talked about how children are able to access these really amazing, safe, nutritious school meals when they're in the learning setting. But what about when they're on weekends or school vacations? Or what about towns where schools and early care education providers don't qualify for federal meal programs? And what about the rest of the family? How are we going to be able to afford these nutrient-dense, safe foods at home? We're going to dive into food access programs and talk about how they're able to fill those gaps for families that find they don't have financial freedom to purchase enough foods that they want and need every day of the week. And like Kayla said, there were problems with food insecurity in our state before COVID. Again, 1 in 7 Vermonters pre-COVID were facing food insecurity and hunger. And this pandemic has just exacerbated it, and it's made clear that we need to continue being advocates for families accessing food.
So thank you, Keely. Let's connect school meals and 3 Squares Vermont. We're going to get into more detail, but just a general overview. If a household is already receiving free school meals, but they are not participating in 3 Squares Vermont, they're likely able to receive the benefits. If a household with school-age children is participating in 3 Squares Vermont, their students receive free school meals without filling out a school meal application. And overall, when children eat for free at school, families have more room to stretch their food budget or have flexibility for other expenses and bills that do come up, that all families face. So what is 3 Squares Vermont? It is Vermont's first line of defense against hunger, and it provides federal money to people to buy the foods that they want. 3 Squares Vermont is nationally known as SNAP. It is the same program, but in 2009, states had the opportunity to change the name of their state's program if they so choose. And Vermont chose to go with 3 Squares Vermont to highlight the fact that families and individuals deserve the right to access 3 square meals a day. Just some more background information on 3 Squares Vermont. The Department for Children and Families Economic Services Division are the folks who process the application and issue benefits. So who is 3 Squares Vermont for? I originally did not have this slide, but on the survey data that we got back, there were quite a few questions of who is this program for? And I was like, okay, that is a really great question. And so I created this slide basically to highlight that it is for everyone. Of course, it's income-based, but it's for families and children. It's for individuals, older adults, people with disabilities, people with jobs, people without jobs, people experiencing homelessness, people who own homes, and college students. This is just important to highlight because I think very often, Three Squares Vermont is a program that's kind of still rooted in stigma from the food stamp days, and people don't truly understand what it is and how people can benefit from it. So to connect to that, Three Squares Vermont is a federal entitlement program. So everyone who is eligible is entitled to its benefits. There is this kind of stigma around, well, I don't want to take it away from someone who might need it more, or, you know, I don't want to take a handout, or like quotes that we hear often. And that's just certainly not true at all. We all pay into this program and we all deserve to access it if and when we need it. So some more information on how Three Squares Vermont works. Folks who receive Three Squares Vermont benefits will receive an electronic benefits card, also known as an EBT card. It's way more efficient and anonymous than the days of food stamp books. And it truly looks and serves the purpose of a debit card. There's an automatic monthly allotment that's deposited onto the EBT card. It can be used at 600 retailers in Vermont, over 40 farmers markets in the state. And also something that a lot of people don't realize is that it can be used anywhere that EBT is accepted in the US. Again, Three Squares Vermont is SNAP, it's a federal program. So chances are wherever folks travel within the country, as long as it's a grocery store and they have the sign in their window that says EBT is accepted, they can swipe their EBT card. Also, benefits remain on the card for up to a year, which is really great. So if a family doesn't go through their entire monthly benefit, it'll just roll over and it'll keep rolling over up for the year. So there's 2 steps to Three Squares Vermont participation. The first step is to determine eligibility. And in order to determine an eligibility, it's based on household composition and also gross monthly income. If it's determined that you are eligible, it is then about finding the right benefit amount. And that's based on net monthly income and expense deductions such as medical, childcare, and housing. I want to also pull some recent numbers. So on the right-hand side, you'll see the maximum benefit amount chart based on household size. This is the most recent numbers we have. It's from June 2020, but the average monthly benefit for a household with children is $532. And if it's a working household with children, it's a little bit more. It's about $570. And overall, 9 out of 10 households, regardless of size or children or no children, receive about $50 a month or more. I say that because, again, with the stigma around Three Squares Vermont, a lot of families decide not to apply because they think that they're not going to receive a benefit that'll help them, or they just assume they're not going to get anything. And again, that's really not true. I mean, 9 out of 10 households receiving $50 a month, even if that's the benefit amount you get, that's still $50 extra to stretch your food budget or add into your expenses, and it can roll over and accumulate. But the trend for Vermont is that a household with children will receive an average monthly benefit of way higher than that. So Three Squares Vermont also connects folks to other programs. Participation in Three Squares Vermont can connect families to free school meals, as we have talked about and will continue to talk about throughout this presentation, WIC, phone and fuel assistance, Medicaid, and so on. I want to highlight WIC for a moment. In the pre-training survey, we asked questions about WIC, and there are quite a few responses asking, well, why do we need to know about WIC as school nurses? Because it ends when a child is 5 or after 5 years, when kids are 5. And it's kind of twofold. For one, school nurses, you all are potentially working and in communication with families that might have younger children. So you might have a student in your office who comes in, or you know a family is experiencing food insecurity and they have younger siblings, ages 5 or younger. You don't need to know the nitty-gritty about WIC, but it's important to realize that WIC is another program that you could potentially connect families to. Families who are eligible for WIC are automatically income eligible for 3 Squares Vermont. It's something that a lot of people don't realize. And so a lot of families with young kiddos will just apply and receive WIC benefits without realizing that they could also be receiving 3 Squares benefits. And that can only, again, expand their food budget more. There's WIC approved products, so they can use their WIC benefits to buy those specific products and then use their EBT card for 3 Squares Vermont to buy the other things that they can't use their WIC benefits for. So it's just really important to note that that's another program that you can uplift when talking about 3 Squares Vermont. So a few more little nitty-gritty details about 3 Squares Vermont without sparing you too much of the in-depth information that you don't need to know, or for this training, it's not super relevant. But categorical eligibility and direct certification. So households are automatically income eligible for 3 Squares Vermont if they are a participant in Reach Up, also known as TANF. They receive supplemental security income, SSI, or the Vermont Earned Income Tax Credit, which is the next slide or a few slides from now. Just something to note as well, if it comes up, or just to have in your back pocket. Additionally, children living in 3 Squares Vermont households are directly certified. And that means that they can access free school meals without having to complete a school meal application, like I mentioned before. And really, the long and short of direct certification is that the AOE will release a list to your school that has a list of students who should be able to access free school meals because of their direct certification to programs such as 3 Squares Vermont. Okay, yes, so earned income tax credit. This is another little nugget that a lot of people do not realize. It's tax season, so I'm going to bring it up. It's really important to know about this. The earned income tax credit is also referred to as EITC, and it's a federal tax credit for low and moderate income working people. It's a refundable credit that may reduce the amount of tax you owe, or it can give you a refund. It's a really great program that helps get more families' feet through the door to access 3 Squares Vermont benefits, and that's because you're automatically income eligible for 3 Squares Vermont if you received the EITC. There's this weird gap with EITC of in normal times, if you EITC aside, you might not have qualified or have been eligible for 3 Squares Vermont, but because you earn this tax credit, you actually are. Many families don't realize that they've actually received the earned income tax credit after they filed their taxes. So it's just something to bring up or ask. Families can call the Vermont Department of Taxes. They can go through the IRS and they can find out if they have actually, in fact, received the EITC. I also want to highlight 2 special rules for youth in terms of 3 Squares Vermont that I think it might be helpful for you to know. Of course, I don't expect you to retain this entire presentation, so slides will be followed up with you. You can always reach out and ask questions, but just as a framework, there's 2 special rules that apply. What is homelessness? So homeless students should be directly certified by their district or school to access free school meals. In terms of homelessness, households actually do not need a permanent place of residence in order to apply or qualify for 3 Squares Vermont. So all that is needed is a permanent place to receive mail. So if you have a homeless student, you can feel free to use the school address to receive mail, a community organization, or a general delivery at a PO box. And for youth living separately from family, if they are 18 or older, then they can apply to 3 Squares Vermont on their own. However, if they're under 18, they will need to prove that they are living independently and not under guardianship of an adult. This is another slide that I actually did not have. And then I read the survey feedback and was really happy to see that a lot of you asked, as a school nurse, how can I support and connect families to 3 Squares Vermont? And that is such a beautiful question. And then I got a little embarrassed that the slide wasn't already in this presentation, but it's fine. Now it will always be here. So 2 things I think to note from your perspective as a school nurse. Of course, you wear many hats as a nurse, and one of those hats for sure is not to help families apply to 3 Squares in terms of providing application assistance. That is not your role, and that is okay. But what you can do is know how families can apply to 3 Squares to point them in the right direction and what resources you can point them to. So families can apply for 3 Squares Vermont online. They can apply in person at their local ESD office. So that's the Economic Services Division, or they can request a mailed application. So two resources you can connect families to for additional assistance with 3 Squares Vermont, whether it's just general information or application assistance. Through the Vermont Food Bank, they can dial 211. They can text VSSNA to 85511 to receive assistance, or they can send an email to 3svt@vtfoodbank.org. Additionally, across Vermont, we have local community action agencies, and there are folks who work at these capstone agencies who are actually able to provide direct application assistance. So these are great people to connect families to. You can find your local, community action agency online based on your region. But there are folks there who can especially help families through the application process if they don't have access to reliable internet source or a paper application. Folks at their local community action agency can even apply to 3 Squares Vermont on their behalf if they're unable to do so. So just some information to consider and to have in your back pocket in case you need to refer families to outside resources for 3 Squares.
We do have a question in the chat box.
Sure.
Is there still a backpack program sponsored by Vermont Food Bank or other organizations, or another similar program to send food home on weekends?
Not that I know of. Keely, do you have any experience or knowledge of this?
I think there are similar programs, but as of right now, it's region to region. So there are school food service programs themselves that will actually do kind of backpack programs like that. I know in Milton, our food service director kind of took that into his own hands and rearranged his food service program. I know that there are actually elementary and high schools around Vermont that actually have their own food shelves in the school, and they'll do individual backpack programs, and we'll dive a little bit more into advocacy that you can do within your own school to do programs like this. So yeah, we'll dive into that more a little bit.
Becca, are there any more questions in the chat?
Nope, that was the sole question so far.
Perfect, thank you. So the last part to wrap up the information around 3 Squares Vermont and how it connects to school meals is it increases direct certification numbers for your school. It strengthens your school meal program, and it also helps to reduce unpaid student meal debts. So, how can we shift gears and talk about taking action? We kind of gave you the quote unquote policy, and now let's put it into practice. So how can you take this new information that we've provided you today and actually do something with it within your school community? So Keely's going to take us through some strategies, and then we'll be able to talk a little bit more and brainstorm together.
Thank you, Kayla. So the reason that we were so excited to be able to chat with this group of folks specifically is because you all already are champions and advocates for health, and food access and hunger absolutely falls into that umbrella. And so when you have the tools to be a champion, there is so much positive change that we can make in our communities. So we ask that you really identify yourself as a food access and food security champion in your school district. First step is being armed with accurate and accessible information. So like Kayla said, we're going to give you access to these slides that you'll be able to refer to, but we also are providing you with a whole list of resources that you can have on hand, like little desk buddies, so that you have that information accessible. So when you see a child or a family at your school where you're like, I think this information would be really lovely for them, you're able to transfer that information. We want to be able to reach people where they are and to provide support when needed. Again, Kayla and I are here as nutrition and food security specialists at Hunger Free. We don't run these programs, but what we do is we understand how these programs work, and we work with folks like you in the school district to say, you are the ones on the ground, you are the ones connecting with the students and the families. You see them come in and out of your office each day. Like Kayla said in the beginning, maybe grabbing a box of goldfish because they're hungry and their stomach hurts. And we want to be able to give you the tools to be able to just talk at that base level about what is available for families experiencing food security and how you can support them. And also as a champion, you can spread public awareness of what food security looks like and how we can enact these programs like a school food shelf or like a school backpack program that can actually be so helpful in your region. So the first strategy is to create something called a food access team. So depending on your school district, we are so lovely in the state of Vermont to have a very diverse state, very diverse regions, different like school sizes as well. But you might already have a type of health team going on at your school. I know in Milton, we had a farm to school team. And my farm to school team was composed of the school nurse, who was an amazing health advocate, the school food service director, the school gym teacher, and also some parent volunteers. And those are just examples of people in your community who might already be really interested and invested in health, nutrition, and food access. And when you guys come together to create a food access team, there's so much that you can do. School nurses are in the perfect position to be champions for food access. Again, you're seeing children each and every day. You are already health focused, and you're already connecting with families about health. Connect with other food access champions at your school. Are you already chatting with some teachers about your interest in health and food access? Do you chat regularly with your food service director about how the school meal program is going? Are you ordering your giant box of pretzels through your food service director? And also, Hunger Free Vermont can be here to support you. So if this is a strategy that seems really like, I would love to do this, I would love to lead a food access team, and you want to know kind of the next steps, if you're like, where do I go with that? Please reach out to Kayla and I. Again, you'll have access to our emails, and we would love to help give you the resources and support to do something like this. And also partnerships and outreach as a strategy. Advocate for opportunities within your school to increase partnerships and outreach. So partnerships are essential to creating any type of sustainable food access program. So we can work within our schools, especially if we have a really strong school district, again, partnering with someone like the food service director. That's a partnership that's already creating strength and sustainability. But as the school, who else in the community can you partner with? Who else is interested in helping decrease food insecurity in your region? For example, could it be a youth coalition in your town? And just creating a partnership where you have this reciprocal partnership where you're helping, further their programs, maybe their mental health programs, and adding on to that food security to their agenda. That's really important. Going to PTO meetings and giving them flyers for 3 Squares Vermont, parent-teacher conferences, resource fairs, having a table set up, talking about 3 Squares Vermont and WIC, wellness committees, open houses. These are all areas where you can have partnerships and continue to do food security outreach. And these are just a few of our flyers that we've created. They are accessible usually through our website. You can go to our hungerfreevermont.org website, and we always have resources available for you to print off. And you can also reach out to us if you'd like us to print off a bulk amount of resources. But we always want to have flyers and anything on board that you can just kind of hand out when you see the moment or opportunity arise. And now my colleague Kayla will talk about strategies of positive messaging.
Yes.
We have one more question. Sorry.
Sure.
Is that program funded through food service folks? Is a separate line item for school districts, or is it funded by a grant or outside funding source?
Food service programs?
It looks like they're still talking about the backpack program.
Oh, backpack program.
Yeah, it says at our elementary school, a local ladies group does a backpack program. We are working this as well for the high school. And then Clayton was asking, is the program funded through food service folks, a separate line item for the school district, or funded by a grant or other outside funding? I'm not sure if you guys know anything about grants that people could, or outside funding that would add to this. And if Jolene wanted to answer the question, she could raise her hand as well. But if Keely and Kayla, if you could speak to any grants that or outside funding sources that people could turn to, that might be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, if Jolene wants to answer as well, I'd love to hear her perspective. But again, it differs school to school. So some schools have their food program is on a different line. You might know that budget-wise for the school. The food service program at this point is treated like a business, and it's really unfortunate because that's not best practice, we're finding out. But school food service programs are kind of made to make their own money. And some food service programs do catering or a la carte, and they have the funding that they are willing to designate to something like a backpack program. That might be a project that's, figured out by that wellness committee or by that food access committee that you start. I've seen some food access committees in schools, like you said, apply for grant opportunities. So areas where you want to search for grant opportunities might be the Farm to School, National Farm to School Network. They have awesome farm to school grant opportunities that you can apply for in order to purchase extra materials, extra food. The Agency of Ag here in Vermont, the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, has had a lot of really lovely grant programs as a response to the pandemic for schools. So just searching like food service grants can really lead you in the right direction. But we also try to add those outside funding sources on our website when we find them as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
okay,
if I can just interrupt real quick. So Jolene did put her hand up. So I don't know if Jolene, if you want to unmute and make a comment, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. Hi. Yeah. So I'm down in Southern Vermont at Twin Valley Middle High School. The Twin Valley Elementary Schools had this program for a while. They're called the Loose Knit. I feel like I'm missing one of the other word ladies, but they're basically a church group, and they've been doing it pretty seamlessly for a while. And we've talked about moving it to the high school. The challenging part is A little bit of the stigma for the high schoolers, just how to work that out. But it's being talked about, not ruled out. We've had another program, and I don't know if you guys have had that up north there, where restaurants who haven't been able to work during COVID making meals and once a week, and we send them home, and that's gone okay with our middle high schoolers.
Great, thanks so much, Jolene.
Yeah, Jolene, I think the program that you're talking about is the Everyone Eats program as well. That's a lot of regions all over Vermont are using coronavirus relief funds for a program called Everyone Eats. And you might have heard about it, but that's a really lovely immediate emergency food response where we're working with restaurants in all regions of Vermont, and they're providing meals at certain locations for families who've been affected by the pandemic. I know in Milton, it's run from 4 to 6 at the elementary school, where they're having like different restaurants each week that are getting funded to provide these free meals for folks. So that's a really awesome option as well.
Anything else in the chat before we move on?
Nope, we are all set to move ahead.
Awesome. So the last strategy that we just want to arm you with is positive messaging. So like I've said, especially around Three Squares Vermont, there's stigma and shame around the program. And what we can do as food access champions is try to combat that and change the messaging around the program. So there are just 3 examples of positive messaging here on this slide. So households with school-age children help the school when they apply to Three Squares Vermont. Every time you buy your groceries using Three Squares Vermont benefits, you support your health and the health of your family at a critical time in your children's lives as they continue to grow. And our community is strengthened because when we feed our students, we feed our future. So those are just some ideas of positive messaging that we can use when talking about the program, whether it's in a newly formed food access team that you're having discussions in, or you're talking to families, or you're talking to your colleagues about why this is important to uplift in your school community. Regardless of where it is or who you're talking to, it's so important to use a positive spin on the conversation. So now, in the little time we have left, we want to brainstorm. So 2 things. Before we brainstorm, 1, this requires technology, so hopefully things don't go totally nuts on us. But if you're able to participate, in the next slide, there's going to be a prompt, and we're going to ask a question, and you can use your web browser on your phone or your computer, whatever's easier for you to access. And when you type in the code on the next slide, it'll let you respond, send in an answer, and you can send in more than 1. It's totally anonymous. But I want us to work together and inspire one another about next steps, what you might do at your school. So here, we are asking you, what is one action you will take to be a food access champion at your school? So what you can do is, again, open a new tab in your web browser or on your phone if it's easier, and go to pollev.com/Kayla Arena GI 217. If someone wants to put that in the chat so it's easier, feel free so people can just click on it. But once you submit an answer, it'll auto-populate on the screen and things will just keep coming on. So I encourage you to read what other people are saying, and maybe it'll inspire you or think about ways that you can act as a food access champion. And we'll give a few minutes for this before we jump into additional questions and answers and just discussion and talking about this more. I can read some of these out too. I don't know if I can control the screen at this point, but create a food access team, reach out to community food shelf coordinator. I think below it said have outreach materials readily accessible. What happens if I scroll? Oh, I can control it. Okay. Connect directly with the food service managers to make sure we are all on the same page. Suggest the creation of a food access team. Advocate for free universal school meals to continue. We are working on the stigma piece very hard.
I love
Whoever wrote that, if you ever want to connect with me, it's something that we are actively working towards and creating tools for. So I'd be happy to continue that conversation. Communicating options and access in school newsletters of different options. Also discussed in counseling team who may be candidates / need outreach. That's awesome. I think maybe it's not something we have readily available, but something we could create. Keely, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if we have this for schools, but sometimes at Hunger Free, we create like newsletter blurbs or templates that you can use and send out in your school. If we do have that, I can send that over for an additional resource to be linked to this training. And if
newsletter
not,
blurbs.
Yeah, I think we might be able to have something to send over for that to support you in that regard. Just take one more minute to see if anything comes through. But if not, this has been awesome already. Thank you for participating. I'm glad that this worked. All right, at 4:55, I'm going to change the slide. So if anyone's typing, get it in. And if we change the slide and you want to share something, please feel free to put it in the chat or just like audibly share your thoughts, because that's what we're moving into anyways. Let me see below anything that I missed. Create space to have these discussions. Yeah, make sure outreach flyers are readily available. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to switch the slide, but like I said, it doesn't have to end here. So we have 5 minutes left, but we want to just open it up for you to share questions, thoughts. It doesn't have to be a Q&A. It can be a dialogue. I also want to say that this is just the beginning of the conversation. We are so open for anyone on this call to reach out to Keely and myself. Our emails will be linked at the next slide and also with the follow-up after this training. We at Hunger Free, the two of us are here to host a training at your school or your district or SU. We're here to provide technical assistance in your school or just support. We're here to have meetings with you or just to answer your emails if things come up for you while you're chopping vegetables later and you think of us and you think of this presentation. Please feel free to reach out. We're always looking to strengthen our relationships with different schools and different partners and key players in schools. And we know school nurses, you are key players. So please feel free to reach out. But I'm going to stop blabbing and open it up for you all to share any thoughts or questions you have for us.
So it doesn't appear there's anything in the chat box and nobody has a hand raised right now.
Perfect.
So you can keep on blabbing. That's totally cool.
Yeah,
I will
thank
say
you.
that there's a comment in the chat that we would love newsletter blurbs, whatever you could provide to us, kind of like canned that we could send out to families in our newsletters, would be well accepted.
Awesome.
I have a question. I was the one that put the piece about the stigma. We're really struggling with that right now. Our district has some great programs. We have the backpack program in our elementary schools, and on school vacations, we're handing out boxes of food for the week. But that stigma piece is very real. And so any advice you could give, we would love to hear how to navigate that and thoughts that you have. So
yeah, and Kelly, when you say stigma, are you talking about amongst your own colleagues in your school community in terms of like families who come in?
It's actually the students who are aware. The first I heard of it was an elementary principal who overheard a student say, "Oh my gosh, I hope my parents didn't sign me up for one of those backpacks," that kind of thing. And then similar stories about students who are embarrassed because on a Friday before break, they know they're not taking the bus because their parents are coming to pick up a box of food. So it's those kind of stories that we're hearing from students. So
yeah, that is really tough. And Keely, also feel free to jump in. This isn't an immediate response, but something that is really important about the push for universal school meals is removing some of the stigma that currently exists within our school. And that's because currently with the traditional school meal model, again, this is a different school year a little bit because technically schools are operating under universal school meals right now. But typically students can accumulate student meal debt. They can feel, no matter the age, they can feel the shame and stigma of being a free and reduced lunch student. It just exists in the culture of our school. And so advocating and being a part of the Universal School Meals campaign that Keely shared before, and trying to make this a permanent place in our schools. Well, in terms of like the systemic culture of the lunchroom and how school meals work, that will go away because every single student, regardless of their family's income, will have access to free meals. And it's not like pointing fingers at who's getting the help that they need, right? Because that kind of goes away. But at the end of the day, there are going to be the families who pick up food at school and the families who don't. And that's tough. I think regardless if there's universal school meals or not, unfortunately. And I don't have an immediate answer, and I wish that I did. And it's something that I'm going to think about more in detail, because I think when we talk about shame and stigma, we often forget about from the student perspective and how to talk to students about it. And instead, we're so focused on like adults and their families and your coworkers and people in the community. But like students are living it every day. They're the ones who really feel this shame. And I don't think we really have developed the proper tools to equip the adults working with kids to have those discussions. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, and I have noted that. Keely, do you want to add anything to that?
In the interest of time, I will just say, yes, universal school meals. It causes a virtuous cycle, reduces stigma, means more participation in school meal programs, which means school meal programs have more money to increase the quality and the options available, including snacks. And your positive messaging constantly. If we constantly talk about how food is a human right and how everyone should have access to it, and how accessing food and picking up food is what we can do and how we're helping each other, just your constant modeling and positive messaging and making sure all the adults are equipped with that positive messaging is how we start breaking down stigma. I know also there are ways around it for immediate things, like a kid might have a note that says they're allowed to go down to the cafeteria at 3 p.m. And they know what it's for, but not necessarily their peers. So having these food security coalitions at your school where you overcome these problems is so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keely and Kayla, thank you so much for the information that you've shared and your enthusiasm for answering our questions and encouraging us to stand up for the right for food for everybody. I'm so appreciative of that. Those of you who are in attendance, please know that this recording will be up on our website, I'm going to say by the middle of next week. So then you'll be happy when it's there earlier than that. All of the resources that Keely and Kayla have shared with us will also be posted to our website. As a reminder, we have a board of directors meeting on Saturday from 9 to noon. It will be held via Zoom. Please plan to attend. And the nominations for officers for the vacancies are due by, actually tomorrow, to me by email. Again, Keely and Kayla, thank you so very much. Appreciate the work that you're doing and taking time to visit with us today and share this great work and encourage us to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you.